This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is officially week 0 in college football. We have only 5 games on the docket for this weekend, but hey, it's something to whet our appetite before we get into a juicy week 1 in college football. So it's time to kind of resharpen our skills this week in betting college football. Today, we're going to talk to Austin Swaim of FanDuel Research, picking his brain on the college football player prop model he built out this offseason and his read on the biggest games across week 0. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here by Austin Swaim. Check him out on X and Blue Sky at Swaim3. I believe on Threads at the same handle, correct?
Yeah.
Swaim3. Okay.
Yeah, I'll figure out where Threads is installed on my phone, but yes.
I need to move it on the homepage. It's not there, which means I forget to check it, which is probably okay. Honestly, I don't know. We're still throwing darts to see what happens there. But he is, of course, a senior editor for us at FanDuel Research. Again, gonna break down our thoughts on this week's games. Austin, pleasure to have you back on the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jim. We finally made it. We've been doing a lot of fantasy football stuff. We've been doing futures content. We got Futures Day coming up this Tuesday, but these are like real games that count of American football. So we have that to be excited about. And like, NFL teams are doing preseason warmups right now. This is a good warm-up, like you said, for me to test some of this stuff, kind of remember how to research college football. I recommend if you plan on betting a lot of college football, maybe you just put yourself through the process this weekend to get a rep in before we got a big old slate next week.
And I get to break out the new hat as I now live in Lawrence, Kansas. So, we're breaking out the new hat, trying to test that out. We're testing everything across the board. So it is a full slate of new stuff on the menu for this week. You mentioned Futures Day. That is a good timing by you, because on Monday, we're going to have a show. We're going to have some writers from FanDuel Research, including Austin, on the show to break down their favorite futures for the 2025 NFL season in preparation for Futures Day. That show is Monday. Futures Day itself is on Tuesday. So subscribe to Covering the Spread and check out the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page to get those shows as they go live, along with all of our weekly previews, a lot of NFL stuff around the corner, the Heat Check back on the YouTube page as well. So FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, leave us a thumbs up there, but also hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the podcast feed, Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. On Tuesday, August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day, a new holiday for football fans. It is 24 hours of deals on all your favorite football season predictions. So take a flyer on the MVP race, crown your champion in August, or parlay your division winner dark horses. Mark your calendars. This is your day for your hunches, your hot takes, your calls, and your odds. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit M&T Gambling Help.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, before we dig into the specific games, Austin, do you want to pick your brain about building out that college football player prop model, a passion project for you throughout this entire offseason, and neat and tidy, ready to go for week 0. So what went into that process for you, building that out, and kind of what were all the steps for you, given that is a pretty big undertaking?
Yeah, it is an undertaking, but it's less of an undertaking when I've got great teammates like yourself. You have a few models, and then Brandon Gadula, our mutual friend, if he lets us call us friends. I'm going to
go with that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to know. I won't tell him. Don't worry.
But you guys have been awesome to lean on with some stuff as well, because you got experience doing so. But I wanted to do this because I feel like in terms of both betting prop markets as well as college football DFS, which was an original passion of mine back when it came out on FanDuel Fantasy, I think we have a very limited set of resources that can quickly and tangibly apply weekly injury news to expected production in college football. I feel like the market is very soft because it has a hard time doing that. And so I'm really trying to work off of more than just recent averages in terms of like workload, like projected workload for this particular week. I don't think that that's very prevalent in college football. So I started with a team level, like projected play volume, pass rates. You look at tendencies as well as applying spreads and totals where possible. The toughest part is kind of some new tendencies in week 0. We have new coaches, new staffs, new rosters. It's a difficult thing to project. So we'll see how that goes in week 0 and week 1, but it should get easier throughout the season. And then applying a relevant projected role to someone's per catch, per rush efficiency in their own matchup. So I really like where it is, because if there's a big injury, if say, we're going to talk about Dylan Edwards for Kansas State, if he's not playing, the team total is going to go down, the implied total is going to go down. So that'll encapsulate lower expectations across the board. So I like where it sits, but as you know, with someone with a lot of models yourself, there's always room to tweak and improve.
I am currently in the process of building out an anytime touchdown model for the NFL too. So I am working on this as well. And it is a complex process, to be sure. Should be ready for week 1. But yeah, I think that the interesting thing here, the thing that I've taken solace in myself, is that I don't have to run this for every game, because yes, there are a lot of college football games, but you don't have to bet on them. Like, you can say like, okay, I'm going to watch Iowa State, Kansas State on Saturday. Maybe I want to run the model for this one. So I think that is kind of like the thing that people may overlook with kind of building out a model, is you don't have to run it for every game. You can kind of pick select games that you like, and yeah, you're going to miss some value somewhere, but that's okay. If it makes you feel more at ease, if it makes your model more efficient, if it allows you to have more fun with it, I think that's actually a positive. So I've kind of had that like acceptance with myself, is I'm not going to run my touchdown model for every game. I can run it for the games that I care about and stuff like that, like Outland games, etc. Is that kind of the same approach you're going to take with college football this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to force anything, and like
Yeah.
am working off of FanDuel's main slate, which typically has the best games in the conferences that matter. And like, the news around injuries is most prevalent in some of these larger conferences too, which helps. It's rather than if you get into MAC injury reports, it can be kind of a wild, wild west scenario. So good example this week, Maverick McAvoy, making his debut for Western Kentucky. He was at Abilene Christian last year. I don't really feel comfortable projecting him and his efficiency at an FBS level, even though he threw for like 1 billion yards on Texas Tech last year. I think he's pretty good, but I don't think I need to dive into that prop market and try to model it and just take at what would be an educated guess. We'll stick to the guys that have played in a decent comp of a system.
Well, I'm excited to see how things play out for this week. So let's dive in and break down week 0, beginning with the Dublin game. It is Iowa State taking on Kansas State right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. They have Kansas State favored by 3.5. That is up from 3 earlier this week. And the total is 50.5 for this game. Iowa State obviously losing 2 big key pieces at wide receiver, a lot of turnover for them on offense. What's your read on this game out in Dublin?
Yeah, I agree with that totally. We haven't seen Rocco Becht yet without both of ISU's departing receivers. Of course, day 2 picks, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Higgins sat out of the Pop-Tarts Bowl last year, which was cinema if you missed the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but Jalen Noel played. So we'll see how he does. He had a 69.4 QBR last year. He was just 43rd in FBS. I do think he's the stronger passer of the two of these guys playing in Dublin over Avery Johnson, but when you consider level of competition, maybe he's a little bit overvalued off of that Pop-Tarts Bowl because Miami wasn't playing a lot of key guys and starters on defense. He completed just 37.1% of his passes against Kansas State in a game that mattered last year. So I keep that in mind. And I think it's a little bit more plug and play for Kansas State, even though it's halfway across the world, which is kind of an adjustment. I mean, you went to a Dublin game, you know the difference in travel and food and all that stuff. But Avery Johnson comes back, and then they've got Dylan Edwards, who's going to take the lion's share of the backfield work from DJ Giddens, who's now in the NFL, and a fun player himself. But Edwards is well qualified. He had moments with the Buffaloes 2 years ago in Colorado, as well as he was in a bit of a timeshare here last year. So I think they have more continuity. So I like Kansas State -1.5 in the first half here. At the end of the day, I think it's about running the ball. And that matchup, Iowa State gave up the 10th most rushing yards per attempt in FBS last year. They only added one starter in the front seven. It was Temtoa McDonough. He's a defensive end from Yale that's coming over. I don't think that's enough to take them from a bottom 10 rush defense to a good one. So I think Kansas State, like they did last year, can control the tempo. They can run the ball with Dylan Edwards and Avery Johnson. And I think they'll be able to get off to a fast start here, even though laying the hook 3.5 overseas. I'm not loving it for the full game, but I definitely think they will have an easier time adjusting to their new offense and their new system.
As you mentioned, 1.5 is the first half spread for K-State. That is minus 110 on that. Okay, let's give this player prop model its first little run for its money. Any props you like for this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to add Dylan Edwards over 80.5 rushing yards, minus 114. It's the same sort of thought process behind there. This is a really good matchup, and my projections model thinks so as well. I'm giving him about DJ Giddens' 50-ish% rush share, basically the lead for Kansas State. I expect there'll be some sort of committee here, even if I don't think it's just going to be a 60-70% snap share for Edwards, especially right out of the gate. So I have him projected for 18.7 carries. That's 112.8 projected yards when you factor in he averaged over 6 yards per carry last year, and then Iowa State's poor defense. So plenty of breathing room against 80.5, even if his efficiency or the role isn't quite as good as I'm expecting.
All right. That is, again, Dylan Edwards over 80.5 rushing yards, minus 114 in his first game as the K-State lead back here as they take on Iowa State over in Dublin. Let's move now to the second key game across week 0, which is right here in Lawrence. That is Fresno State at Kansas. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. I missed it all. There we go. Scrolling back up.
Got a few games to go through.
There we go. Fresno State at Kansas right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. Kansas favored by 13.5 at home. Total in this game is at 50.5. Jalen Daniels somehow still in college. He has been there for a decade, it feels like. He is the quarterback for this year. They managed to finish on a relatively high note last year, despite an overall disappointing season. So defeated some quality opponents there, a lot of ranked teams. Sorry to bring that up, Austin, as a Colorado fan. My bad. Kind of forgot about that here. But can KU cover a big number here?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's an interesting matchup, and what are the odds that one of the 3 games that matters this week is in your new hometown? It's small world and a glitch in the matrix, if you will. But 13.5 is a pretty large number. It's over a key number of 13.5. I prefer a team total angle here. I'm looking at your Jayhawks under 31.5 points, minus 130. It's a lot to do with, I think, Fresno State's a really underrated defensive culture at this point. They were 28th in rushing yards per attempt allowed last year, 3rd in passing yards per attempt, and they returned 3 of the 4 starters in the secondary and added a grad transfer for the last. So I think the secondary is going to be pretty darn sporty again. And when I look at Daniels, it's sad to refer to him this way because he's a guy that is in college and you think to yourself, hey, he's got plenty of years ahead of him. I almost kind of refer to Jalen Daniels' prime as a couple of years ago because he's really gone through a lot of back and core injuries. And there's kind of a precedent in this conference for this. Guys like Alan Bowman and Cam Rising last year that when they were here, yes, they were more experienced and they were older and they should have been better, but at some point injuries took a little bit of a toll, and Daniels was only 46th in QBR last year. So I don't know how efficient this Kansas passing game is going to be right away. They lost Evan Neal to the NFL draft. Highshaw is a good replacement there in the backfield, but I like the under because of Fresno State's pace, because of their defensive prowess. And by the way, Fresno brought in Matt Entz. And if you don't know Matt Entz, he headed up North Dakota State, the FCS powerhouse, all the way through 2023. And those guys suffocate people on that side. So I think Kansas is going to have a more difficult time scoring. Fresno's got a new starting quarterback, so I don't know if they keep pace well enough to cover, but I do like the team total angle for the Jayhawks here.
That under of 31.5 points is minus 130 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I will forgive you for betting against, I guess, now my Jayhawks in this opener, because we're not going to this game. We're going to go Friday, I think, to their second game against Wagner. Tickets a little cheaper for a Friday night game. So I'll forgive you because we're not going to this game. So just letting you know about that one.
The FCS opponent's the pro move. You kind of don't have to really sweat if they're going to win or not. And I think Kansas gets it done here, but I'm also looking in the prop market. If you want to talk about that, I bury your Jayhawks. It's kind of a weird thing. I live in Lubbock. They're not my Red Raiders, so I don't want to do that to you. But I'm going to look at Jalen Daniels under 200.5 passing yards. Kind of a low line for a guy that has his sort of name value. but I think it's appropriate because there are a lot of paths to failure here. We've got the 13.5-point spread in Kansas's favor. Kansas has a top 25 rush rate as well. Lance Leopold prefers to run the ball and work off of that. Jalen Daniels' own legs are an obstacle here. He's a guy that can get it done on the ground too. I've only got him projected for 196.4 passing yards, so I'd put like minus 162 on the under at 200. So I think that Daniels has a lot of paths to failure to come in on the underside of this, where as I feel like maybe the public might look at this game, they approach it and say Daniels is good. He's experienced, over 200.5 yards, low bar, but this isn't a great environment for passing.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's experienced might mean they don't feel the need to kind of, like if it were a true freshman starting stuff like that, they might feel the need to kind of get him as many reps as possible. That's not really the case with Daniels. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So in this game, Austin is on Jalen Daniels under 200.5 passing yards, minus 114, and Kansas under 31.5 points at minus 130. Let's wrap up here by talking about the Saturday night game out in Hawaii. Some big movement in the betting odds in this game. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Hawaii is favored by 2.5 against Stanford, and the total in this game sits at 50.5. Austin, what's your read on this game as both these teams come off of pretty down years last year?
Yeah, I'm also not an authority on time zones. This might be like a midday game in Hawaii. I'm not actually sure how that works, but yeah, it's an interesting matchup, and I'm kind of happy to see Stanford because Andrew Luck takes over as the general manager here. You got Frank Reich in town, so we got some popular football names for Stanford, and I really do think he is turning the program in a much better direction when you look at what he's already put on paper. Ben Goldbranson's going to step in at quarterback for them, ended up winning the job in camp. Experienced guy coming over from Oregon State, completed 60.9% of his passes last year, 126.9 passer rating. Now, he's a statue. He's not going to add a lot with his legs, but to deliver in an Andrew Luck sort of system, play action on time, Goldbranson's a pretty good guy for that. It certainly is an upgrade over whatever I studied with Alec Iamananer earlier this year for the NFL draft. But if there's a week that you're going to travel to Hawaii and I think you're going to be okay, I think it's week 0. That's why I like Stanford money line here, plus 104. You look at Hawaii last year, they were 6-1 against the spread. The one game they didn't cover was week 0 against Delaware State. And it's because I think you have more time to adjust to the travel. It's not like you just played a game and now you're flying all the way to Hawaii and it's kind of a weird travel situation. That's probably why Stanford is here in the first place. And I don't think Hawaii's a bowl team at this point. You look at ESPN's SP Plus rankings, Hawaii's 106th in the country. Stanford is 82nd. And there's a lot of new moving parts transfer. We saw some of this with my Colorado Buffaloes and a lot of different teams. You can bring talent in quickly in college football now. I think Andrew Luck's pulled a lot of levers with guys that I like. So I'm going to take plus money here when I think Stanford might even be able to compete for a bowl game in the ACC this year, get to that 6-7 win mark.
Hearing ACC still threw me off there. But anyway, like a bowl game for them would be a very, very good output for Andrew Luck in his first year there. So that could be a lot of fun. So Austin is on the Stanford money line, plus 104 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Any props for you in Stanford against Hawaii?
Yeah, let's meet Stanford's new number 1. I mentioned Iamananer. He's in the NFL now. I think it's going to be CJ Williams, who's in the receiving prop market over on FanDuel. Goldbranson, you say what you want about him. Maybe he didn't have the best QBR, but he supported a 34.7% target share and over 900 yards last year for Trent Walker. I think CJ Williams is the guy for Stanford this year. I barely knew who he was, but I did know who he was from the last 3 years with both the USC Trojans and the Wisconsin Badgers. 12.3 yards per reception. Just 35 catches. So he's one of these guys that was buried behind some pretty good options on the depth chart. But now transferring over to Stanford, I think he is the guy, and there's a ton of vacated targets here. Even at a conservative target share projection, 22%. I think Williams will be at like 27, 28% for the season. I still have him at 64 receiving yards on the dot, 4.4 catches. So I think this line is too low, especially when Hawaii was a pretty non-menacing pass defense opponent last year. They were 65th in yards per attempt allowed, and you consider that's against a Mountain West schedule. It's probably even worse. So I think Williams with Goldbranson as a pocket passer will have enough opportunities, probably see about 5-6 targets to be able to get over this 42.5 line.
The baseline number is 42.5 minus 114. Any thought to you to going towards the alt market? FanDuel Sportsbook does have 50 plus yards at plus 118, 60 plus 178. Is that a bit too much for you given the uncertainty around that kind of target share projection for him, or do you want to take some swings at the higher upside markets here?
Yeah, I mean, you could. It is week 0, and my fear with Stanford is that I'm projecting them to have a pretty high rush rate in their new system. So, especially if the power gap between these teams and there's an early lead for Stanford, I'd be concerned about the passing volume. But if you told me this game was back and forth shootout, like the spread in total kind of implies, I'd love alternate markets for Williams. I'd have minus money on 60 plus yards. So I'm good dicking into the alternate market here. But for me personally, I'm just going to stick to the traditional line.
All right, so that's 42.5 minus 114 for CJ Williams and the Stanford money line at plus 104. We do have a couple of the games on tap for this weekend, Austin. Any other markets standing out to you in those other games?
There was one thing that I didn't give you yet from my player prop projections, a touchdown. So why don't we look at an anytime touchdown? That'll be the last one I'll give you. Let's look at the Sam Houston State Bearcats. Eat 'em up cats, spelling not something that Jim off camera was super happy about. Bearcats with a K, but they're taking on Western Kentucky.
It's awful. I can't, man.
So Jim's rooting for Hilltoppers money line here.
I am. Western Kentucky is a good speech team too. We're all aboard the Hilltoppers here.
Yeah, and Western Kentucky, by the way, is a week 0 staple. It feels like I get them every year. It's how I met Malachi Corley a couple weeks ago, or a couple years ago. But I love this touchdown prop here for Elijah Green, who has moonlighted, shared some time with Omarion Hampton at UNC a couple years ago. He was at Indiana last year, scored 5 touchdowns for the Hoosiers. Now he's at Sam Houston State and should have a big old workload, and they badly needed him when the biggest rush share they gave a running back last year was just 29.7%. They didn't have a guy next to Hunter Watson who's kind of a dual threat gunslinger. Now they have a guy in Elijah Green, even though I don't know if he's a 3-down guy. He hasn't caught a pass since 2022, so we'll see. But he does do this. 5 touchdowns on 29 carries last year. He's a big back, a goal line hammer. I expect they're going to give him a pretty meaty role this year at Sam Houston State. But even if I play it conservative, 40% of the carries on Saturday, 15.8 carries projected, 100.4 yards, 0.75 touchdowns. I don't know certainly about the role. If they could do a really messy committee here, things could get ugly on the yardage front, but I like the touchdown because that's what Green did for Indiana. I expect him to do it here for Sam Houston State, and they're a double-digit underdog, which is why I think this line's a little undervalued, but the team total is still 24.5. They're going to score points on Western Kentucky. I think Green hammers one into the end zone here.
All right, that is Elijah Green, anytime touchdown, plus 120, and that's Sam Houston State taking on Western Kentucky on Saturday. That is all that we have here for today, previewing week 0 on covering the spread. But as mentioned, on Monday, we're going to preview FanDuel Futures Day, breaking down our favorite futures bets with the writers at FanDuel Research popping in and giving their picks for this year. So make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread and also the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page with a lot of good stuff to come throughout the entirety of this fall. Find Austin on X and Blue Sky and Threads at Swaim3. Check him out at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor for us. Austin, good luck to you with week 0 of the model. Hope it goes well for you. Enjoy having college football back in your life, and looking forward to talking to you again on Monday. Talk some Futures Day.
Absolutely. I've got to pick just one future to give you. I got a lot of them to mine through and figure out which one's number 1, but we'll do so.
Same. I am in the same boat for sure. Again, Swaim3 on all social media platforms. I am at JimSannes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and also on Threads at Jim.Sannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work in the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your week 0 bets. We'll talk to you once again next week for college football week 1, but also Futures Day. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.